Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Pavini Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic, and science. Pavini explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders, and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We're in the business of healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant, erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. And I'm your host, Dr. Pavini Moray. And today it's a great pleasure to welcome Michelle Embree onto the show. Michelle is a professional tarot card reader and teacher. Her tarot work is featured monthly in Anti-Gravity magazine. She is a writer and a performer of spellcraft, and she holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, philosophy, and a master's of fine arts degree in writing. And so you can check out more about Michelle and her work at michelleembree.com, MICHELLEEEMBREE.com. Michelle, welcome. I'm so glad to have this time with you.
Hi, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. This is exciting.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the ancestor relationships that you have. How do you know your ancestors, or even maybe a story about like a time that you've connected with your ancestors?
Well, I had in 2014, I was in this little town in Kentucky, and I was just, I don't know, I was just wanting to find some interesting people, some weirdos like myself, right? So I wound up going and doing one of those quantum hypno sessions where they regress you into past lives. I wasn't even really sure what I thought about past lives at the moment that I was doing it, but I wanted to have the experience and I wanted to meet people in this area. So what wound up happening is the idea with the quantum hypno work is that you'll see two different past lives, right? That didn't actually happen, but what wound up happening was this really, really beautiful experience that I had where I looked up and there was my maternal grandmother, whom I was very close to when I was young, and she died when I was 19, so I was still pretty young when we lost her. But she was definitely a member of my family that I was very close to. And during this session, she came and she was so real. She was so present and she was so joyful and so happy to see me. And it was so interesting because she kept like looking down. We were in her house that she had lived in when I was a kid, and I used to like to go visit her there. And she was laughing at the floors, at the torn up, kind of worn linoleum on the floor, and the kind of ugly 1970s carpet in the living room, and she was laughing. And but I understood her, even though she wasn't using all these words. She was saying, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." I get emotional just talking about this. She's like, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Look how look at all this this cheap flooring and these cheap things. Isn't it so silly? Isn't it so ridiculous? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all about the joy. All you take with you is the joy." And so we spent this time together, which was really super special to me. And one of the things that she communicated to me before we left this hypno session is she said to me, she said, communicated to me, it wasn't exactly words, but she was speaking to me directly. And she said, "Michelle, you keep looking for this place where the bad things started." It does, it makes me emotional. "You keep looking for this place where the bad things started." She's like, "It's not like that. It's all mixed up. It's all mixed up. But it doesn't matter. Once you leave here, you only take the joy. The rest of it's just like this flooring." And then that was it. My grandmother's been just really very, very physically, viscerally present with me since that day. And she released me really from a lot of my wondering, because I had, trauma in my childhood. And she was just saying, like, you keep trying to find where the bad started, but it's not like that. So that's a very vivid experience that I had.
Yeah, thank you. It's so interesting. There's two things that I want to draw out in what you said. One is the kind of the way that you receive that communication, where it's kind of words, not words, right? And I just think of all the folks who I've sat as they've been with their ancestors, and how the ancestors come, and sometimes it is words, but often it's this thing that you're speaking of kind of just this. It's like almost beyond words, like, but communicate, very clear communication and beyond words, and which is why we can speak with ancestors who, when we don't even know our ancestral languages, right? Like, we can still communicate with them. And then this other piece is around it's not how it is. It's all mixed up, and that perspective that your grandma brought into your awareness of that there are ways that the dead can see that are just really different than how we see things, right? Like, we see things as like time is this line that goes from here to there, and we're on this horizontal passage through it. And she's saying, no, that's not actually what's happening, right? And so you can't actually, like, the healing isn't related to the understanding of when it was or what it was, right? That the healing is all mixed up in with the wounding, in that it's I don't know. I mean, like an opportunity is kind of the sense that I'm getting. Yeah.
Yes, I think that what I really took away from it too is her saying, look, life is really beautiful, and that's why you came, for the joy of it. That's why you're here. But coming into a body and living in this material organic life means that there's going to be these other things. There's going to be pain, and there's going to be confusion, and there's going to be even harm, even trauma. Like, these things are going to be part of that organic life, but that's not why you came, and those aren't the meanings of this. That's just part of what you deal with in choosing to have this beauty, to experience this beauty and this joy, to breathe in this life. That's very much what I took from it. It was very liberating. It was very liberating.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because I think there's this idea that's not part of it, right? That we're not here to endure those things. And yeah, it just sounds like, from what she shared, and what I agree with also, is like, those things happen, right? Like, hard things happen, painful things happen, harmful things happen. And it's not that they happen, it's the how we are around them happening. And what I'm hearing that she was offering you in that was a choice of the how. Like, where are you going to focus your attention? Are you focusing on your attention, your identity around the wound, or are you focusing on remembering that you came for this embodied experience, which includes the wound and also includes this deep joy? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's
Yeah. Yeah. So great. I love thinking about it as choice, because that's, for me, that's what feels safe. If I have a choice in how I respond, and I'm not at the whim of, yeah, just being reactive.
Well, and
Um,
feeling like I have to make some kind of resolution for the bad things that happened, or find some reason or meaning. And I really feel like she said that's not relevant. That's not why you came.
right. It's kind of like the faded linoleum.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That was like, look how silly this is. Who cares? And yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you for that, and sharing. It's tender. And I want to talk with you about Tarot. And I'm curious of how it came to be, what you're practicing, and kind of your path. And I'm curious to go more in depth with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, I can tell you where it came into my life. I was living in New Orleans in 2001, and I delivered pizzas on my bicycle, which was a job I loved. I got to see all of the French Quarter, and I just got to see the interiors of all these wonderful spaces and places. It was a terrific job. But at some point in time, I had been hit by a car, and I got a concussion. I landed on my head and got a concussion. And I had a concussion for a few weeks, but really I was okay. And I went back and to work, and I did my thing. And it wasn't maybe, I don't know, 8, 9 months later. It was the beginning of 2002. And that injury, bone injuries like that can come up later. And so it was actually a neck injury that didn't surface for several months, and it was bad. Something in my neck slipped out, and my I wasn't really able to use my right arm for several months. It was incredibly painful. I couldn't really get the medical help I needed for it. So it was a pretty bad situation, and I was in bed for several months, and I was in a lot of pain. And the only thing that really took my mind off the pain was occasionally I had a housemate who would read to me. And other than that, all the things I liked to do at the time, which was read books and write quite a bit. I was always a writer. I also enjoyed television quite a bit back then. But I couldn't even do that. Like, I didn't even want to watch television. I didn't want to do anything. Like, the pain was just kind of incredible, except for the storytelling that would happen. And at some point during this injury, early on in it, another friend said, I was given these tarot cards and I don't think they're for me, but I think you might like them. And she gave me the card. And that kind of changed everything, because then that took my mind off the pain I was in. And I was also learning a lot being in that space where I physically couldn't take care of myself. I was in pain. I was psychologically confused and going back into a lot of trauma from my life that I didn't fully understand just at that time, just yet. But I was using the tarot cards on a daily basis to take my mind off of those things and to kind of teach me about even what I was going through. So after 3 months all I did for 3 months was learn to read tarot cards. Once I was back on my feet, I was like, all right, who wants tarot card reading? And I was pretty good at it from the start. That's how it came into my life, and then has certainly continues to evolve and develop as I go along.
One of the curiosities I use tarot, I use it daily. I have about it though is when consulting the tarot, who or where is that information coming from that we're receiving?
Uh, I allow to be open and evolving also. I do teach tarot to people. And so at the beginning, I say it's kind of what you decide that it is. I have something that I call guides very generically. Like, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I certainly get impressions of something that I feel like is not me. And I wouldn't say that it's my ancestors either. I'm not entirely sure what it is, and sometimes I think, well, maybe it's just a more relaxed part of myself that's telling its own story, which is kind of arriving as what I might call guides. And that would be plural. I actually I see three of them, and they're male essentially, for whatever reason. And I think that right there, I think, just comes from living in this patriarchal Christian type society on the whole. And so I don't know that I think that my guides really are male, but that is how they tend to appear in my mind's eye. Almost like, now that I'm saying it, it's almost like the three kings coming for Jesus or something. And they come in on my right side, and there's all this golden light around them. I feel like that's a story that's more implanted in my regular consciousness that causes me to see them in my mind's eye in that way. Again, then I question, is it really external to myself, or is it more of a relaxed part of myself that's allowed to know things? So anytime I'm opening one of my classes on tarot, I always put it out there as like, you need to kind of decide for yourself what you feel like this is. And if it helps you to feel like it's just a way of telling the most relaxed, most knowing part of yourself that it's okay to know, I think that's the most important part of it. I think probably I'm really, you and I both, and probably everyone, are plugged into this complete consciousness. And we're consistently, unplugging ourselves for a variety of reasons, in part just so we can be here and have this experience on this beautiful, lush rock, with our little human brains. And maybe that would be very hard to do if we were in full consciousness all the time, or impossible. So I don't know. In a lot of ways, I just think it's the part of myself that's plugged into that absolute omnipotent consciousness. And when I use tarot cards, I'm saying it's okay to have these messages and to be in contact.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Because what I hear in that is I'm willing to dwell in the mystery of not knowing.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. That's the funnest part.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, just in my experience of tarot, I think the thing that gets me the most is the humor of it. Of like, I'll be like, pull a card and be like, that's not the right card. My hand just slipped. And then shuffle, 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 and then pull the same card again. Like, okay, I just don't want to hear that message, and that's showing up, or kind of when cards show up on repeat, especially if it's something I'm trying to avoid. Or yeah, just sometimes they're funny.
They're hilarious.
Right, and I appreciate that so much. And I know that you talk about tarot as a book, a story, and I wonder if you'd say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a quote from Paul Foster Case, who says, "Tarot is a book disguised as a deck of cards." And I just love that quote because it's so succinct and so compact, and I think that's really true. It's really like a never-ending story, but it's kind of, I mean, choose your own adventure isn't the right word, but it's taking all of the elements, all of the possibilities, and it's shuffling them. So it's the story of all of human life in a way, and it's shuffling them, and then you lay them out. It's showing you the parts that are upcoming for you, or the parts that you can dwell on and look at right now. So I really see it as just this deck of cards is just a deck of stories. And when like in math, there's really only 10 numbers. There's 0 through 9, but you can get to infinity from there. And I think that that's really what we do with tarot cards. There's really a finite number of experiences that we're going to have. Really, there's a finite number of attributes to the human experience. But when you put them in all these different orders, you get an infinity of stories, an infinity of lives. That no two of them are the same. And so I think that it's just such a wonderful to be able to hold this deck of cards and say, I have this infinite potential for story in my hand. Is it exciting on a daily basis?
Yeah, thank you for that. I like that interpretation of it. And I wonder about the connection between storytelling and healing. How do you weave those things together?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. That's a good one. That's like a sigh. That's a healing sigh that comes out even just hearing that question. How we tell the stories about ourselves is absolutely how we heal ourselves. It's how we empower ourselves. Like you can tell a story that empowers you to heal. You can tell a story that empowers you to thrive, or you can tell stories that hinder you and hold you down. The way we go about, I love to give clients and students like, here's these options. Like, we can see these different stories about destiny and about fate and about what we've endured and about what we want and about who we are in all of these different ways. And none of them need to be specifically true for them to be a tool for us. If you just take the way you tell your stories about your own attributes, things that you consider to be a strength or things that you consider to be a weakness. If you're like, oh, well, it's terrible. I'm always forgetting things, and this and that. And that's how you tell the story about yourself. Well, then, like, for one thing, you're probably going to be forgetting more things because you're telling yourself that that's what you do. But you're also giving yourself this story where that's a bad thing. Like, what if it's just like, oh, well, you don't need it in this moment, so you're not thinking about it. You're thinking about the next thing. What if you tell your stories about yourself in a way that's really empowering? And even when like something that I like to say to people is that, when we're dealing with trauma, I never liked the idea of telling the story like, well, that traumatic thing happened to you so that now you can become magical. I mean, you were born magical, right? And a traumatic thing happened to you because that's just what happened. And it may have even been a crime. Like, I don't appreciate the storytelling that kind of makes trauma into like some kind of magical religious experience. At the same time, that I want every single one of us to tell our trauma story from an empowering point of view. Like, I had that experience, and now that I had that experience and I've worked through all the details that go with having that experience and the pain and the way of thinking that happens from having that trauma, I can then put my hand out to other people who have had that experience also and say, you know what? It's not always what you think it is. It's not about you. It's not your fault. You didn't cause it. It didn't happen to you. Let me show you the steps that you can take to get to this other shore where you can lead a different life. And it's not that you're going to forget that those things happened. It's that you can use those things to empower your steps rather than disempower. And
Yeah.
that's where storytelling really heals.
Do you have cards that represent that progression from kind of the identity around the wounding, the storytelling around the wounding, and kind of embodying that to this empowered sense of like, that happens to me and that's part of my story and it's not the entirety of my story? Like, what cards kind of represent those extremes?
Oh, that's a really great question. So I guess you want to come out of, you got your five of swords. The swords are always really great cards that tell us about our suffering because they relate to the intellect and they relate to the mind. So that really comes down to like, you're going to suffer from thinking. What is it the Buddhists say? Like, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. I don't know that I totally believe that, but definitely thinking is what gives us suffering. So the five of swords would be the defeat card. So trauma is it's in the moment of it, it's a defeat. And so, you're down for the count in a lot of ways. So then you stand up in the 10 of swords, even though it's got all the swords in the back, there's really only one way to go from there. That figure that's down on the ground, I think most people can picture that card. Even people who don't read tarot, you have the figure down on the ground with all the 10 swords in their back. And but they're not dead, surprisingly enough. That character's not dead. So there's only one thing that can happen there is that you stand up and all those swords fall out of your back. And that's going to leave scars, but you're not bleeding to death. You're not dead. You made it. You're going to stand up from those 10 of swords. And I really think the next card that would tell the story of rising up would be the judgment card, in its best sense, which is being called, in that card, there's an angel calling up the dead bodies, right? So even though that 10 of swords character wasn't dead, you're being called up to rise into your highest self. Almost like that card judgment could really be the phoenix. I mean, you could call that card the phoenix. And so there you are, like rising up into the next level of yourself. I mean, having a hard time in life can really give you a gift of insight if we accept it.
Mm. That's a beautiful progression, and thank you for the fluency with that. And when you said judgment, the song that I associate with judgment that I started to hear playing in my head is Black Flag, Rise Above. Rise above, we're gonna rise above.
That's it. Ooh, that'll play in my head now too.
Yeah, sorry.
Great. No, I love that. That's it, exactly.
Yeah. I just want to read something that you've written, because I think that kind of at that point in the conversation, you say, when it comes to tough memories, deep traumas, or unrelenting mental conditions, Tarot can help us to construct a story large enough to hold our healing and our victory over adversity. And I think that's what you're speaking to here. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think a succinct way to put that is disappointment is such a hard feeling. And there isn't always, like, especially if you have trauma in childhood or, well, trauma from a violent crime also, there are just certain things that happen that, like, it's like this huge boulder that gets put in the path, front of the way that you were trying to go. And it's this huge disappointing boulder and you aren't really going to move it. And so just kind of standing there and looking at it and saying, like, I need you to move. What else can I do? This is my path. And now you're in my path. Well, it's just never going to work. You're always going to be stuck on the really painful side of that disappointment, blocked from the path that you want to take. So you can use tarot to open up and create literally this bigger landscape for you where you say, okay, that probably isn't going to be the path. And I understand you're disappointed. Nobody's asking you to get over it. Like, there's that big rock. Walk away, though. Here's a different path. Go to your left. Go to your right. Take these different paths. And it's okay that the original path is blocked now. I think we need a large story for that. I think it's okay to say that this thing that happened in my life changed who I might otherwise have been. I think that that's really reasonable. And I think sometimes the idea that healing, and I put that in quotes, is an end game. I don't think that's true or real, or that we can just continue to be who we were before this happened to us, especially if something happened to you in childhood. For me, I was, the trauma for abuse started in my life before I had cognitive skills. So, so you're really like, whoever I might have been, like, that's out of the question. So I can't really have this story where I just stand there and look at this rock in my way. I need a much bigger story so that I can go play and have this joy and have this wonder in this life. And I really feel like tarot really, really gave that to me, just really opened up so many ways to go play, to go have fun, to go become somebody that I really, really like.
I love that. I am thinking about significant moments that I've had with tarot under times of duress. And I want to give you another sequence and see how it lands for you. This is over a decade ago, was sued by the father of my kids for full custody of my kids. And I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. And the card that I pulled again and again and again during that time, well, there were two cards. One was the Six of Swords. And that card is of a woman on a boat with a child being ferried across water. And that card became like the symbol for the journey that I was on of this really becoming an adult, becoming like fully capable of love, right, for my kids. And then the other card that showed up was the Three of Wands. And like that was kind of like the outcome card. It was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. There's the three of you are going to be together. And then followed by the Four of Wands. And that's actually what happened, was that I ultimately that case resolved and partnered, and then that person became the new step parent to my children. And that trajectory, like when I look back, like over my life, I can be like, oh yeah, this is what you're talking about. Like that story narrative line, it's not just one card, right? It's not just like the Five of Swords forever and ever and ever. There's always going to be a next card. There's going to be something that is the moving energy in the situation. And then there's going to be the resolution of the situation. And I think that, yeah, it bespeaks also this idea that situations, emotions always have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Like any story.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. What do you think about, like, is the tarot, can it ever be an access point with our ancestors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be. I don't know that I necessarily have that experience with it though. But yeah, I think it could be, and I think other people certainly do. I mean, there are cards for certain. Like when I think of my grandmother and that story about my grandmother, it's very much a Three of Cups card, which is, celebrating abundance with other women. There's three women, holding the cup up, and there's a great joy in that. And I associate that card with her. And when I do work with her, like do altar work and things like that, I use that card to speak to her. I don't necessarily get ancestors through my readings, but I do use my cards to speak with them.
Are there any cards that are more ancestry than others that you think of?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've never actually thought about that before. Now I will, but I don't think I have an answer.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that I have an answer either. Like there's nothing that comes to mind. I mean, other than that, like maybe kind of like ancestrally the tarot, right? Because my people are European in origin, it is a divinatory tool that comes through my people, right? And so like I feel like that's part of maybe the lineage of it is the way that I relate to it ancestrally.
Maybe, I mean, the Hierophant kind of says that, like tradition in that way, that could potentially be ancestral. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
When you want to communicate with your ancestors, what are your practices? What are you doing?
I make a small altar. My ancestor work really has to do mostly with my grandmother and also sometimes my father. So it's folks that I knew in my life is usually the people that I work with directly. I also have sometimes I have an aunt too that I work with directly. Other than that, it's a more open-ended kind of my ancestry is European and Amerindian, and so which is like not a lineage that I'm even really aware of. Like I don't know the exact tribes. I don't know the exact names of the people. So I open it up more, just more open-ended with may I have a memory of all that I've been, asked to forget in these various whitewashings and capitalism itself. So may I have a memory of what has been lost. And so I do that work generally by making altars. I love altar work. That's my primary way of doing any type of magic is with an altar. So I'll set up tarot cards that I want to use to communicate like kind of a portal, like these are the things I want to talk about. These are the things I'd like to remember. I use candles of different colors, herbs, things that go along really specifically with the answers that I'm looking for. And I can talk a little bit more about using altars if you'd like. Okay, so for anybody who has like I had for a while I had a really big space where I had a couple of really big beautiful altars that I loved using, but now I'm in my tiny house, so I don't have quite as much space for that. But what you can do, what anyone can do, even in a small space, is you get a little shelf. You can even just go to like some place that sells like hobby supplies, and you get a little shelf, and that can be your altar shelf. And I usually will clear it off with like rosemary essential oil, or I'll use Florida water, and I'll clean it and keep it clear. I don't put anything else on my altar surfaces besides altar work, so I don't use it as a shelf in its off time, even though sometimes I won't have anything on it. And so clear off a space that's on a little shelf like that, or on a little table. If your space is small, so small that you need to double duty something, just clean it with whatever you like to clean with. I think cedar water is a really good way to go. Rosemary water is a really good way to go. And I think that those are plants and herbs that are accessible and appropriate for anyone to use. Geranium is another really good clean, and clear it off and bless it. Say a prayer in your own way of saying that, and then you utilize items and plants and colors and tarot cards, whatever you use, whatever speaks to you, to call what you'd like through the altar. If you're doing a memorial or out of respect to an ancestor, then you put things there that they like, the foods that they like. So, if that's something you want to do. If they liked beer, you put a little bit of beer, all that kind of stuff on your altar to honor them. But if anytime you put food or anything like that on your altar, don't nibble that stuff. That's not for you. When you're done with those things, you need to take them out and put them, with a tree or a bush or something like that. Feed them back to the earth. So that would be my short altar advice.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. And I know that different folks do different stuff with the leftovers from their altar, right? Some people give it back to the earth. Some people do eat it, and like it's like kind of whatever. Yeah, yeah. Like folks in Hindu traditions often, and somebody who I interviewed who's Chinese, like it's considered like what is like you make a spirit offering, and then what's left gets imbibed, and it's considered sacred, like prasad. And so some people do and some people don't. And I just really find that yeah, totally. It's so interesting because people work with their ancestors in so many different ways, right? And I just want to normalize that for everybody. It's like however you're doing it is good.
Right. And just talking sometimes too. Like I'll use the names of the folks that I know and that I use, but sometimes I will actually, especially like when I'm going to, I need to go do something and I need strength to do it, I will just stop and say, I ask for all of my wisest and most healed ancestors to join me in this and to help me succeed in this, because I feel like we're doing it together. I'm doing it for all of them. But I ask for the wise and the healed.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. For me too, it is, at least. Yeah. I want to ask you if you're open to pulling some cards about kind of just where we are right now in this strange moment of quarantine and um, what we might be looking towards, and also like if there's anything that is supportive.
Okay. Well, let's just see what I get. I'm
Okay.
some cards here, and I'll just talk to my cards a little bit, and I'll just say, we want to put out some good wisdom for what we're going through right now. So let's see three cards on it. Let's see three cards, some wisdom for all of us to enjoy right now in this time. Oh, wow. Okay. So what I got the sun, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's actually the sun and a young person enjoying that sunshine on a white horse. And then I got temperance, which is a beautiful card where she's balancing between the water and the land. And she has wings. And then I got the wheel of fortune. So that's like literally the wheel of destiny, right? So
That's amazing.
that's amazing, right? Those are three major arcana cards right there. So that's really amazing. So what I would say from that is that this is like, it's just a really good time for us in the sun. We have the capacity for analysis. And this is, the Apollonian type of analysis. It's not necessarily like your therapist analyzing you specifically, though it could be, but it's to analyze ourselves and our situations, I think, in the light, in a very lighted way, kind of where, we started this conversation in like saying, like telling the story about yourself in an empowering way. And to also just, all of us really recognize that like wherever you are on your path in this life, in infinity, is okay. I think we stop ourselves from certain healings and certain changes that we want to make with ourselves and our lives because we're judging ourselves. And so in the sun and in the feeling, see, there's a feeling that comes through. Now I'm reading cards so that everything's here, all the ancestors, all the guides, and they're talking. And they're just reminding us that, you don't stop. You don't stop. There's no beginning and there's no end. So wherever you are and what you're working with, it's just fine. It really is fine. You can even, recognize things about yourself that really, really do need to change and are really maybe quite possibly very unpleasant. But if you're judging yourself for having them, you're halting your own ability to change. So now's a really good time to see who you really are in this light that just says, hey, that's where you're at and that's okay. And that's going to take us into this temperance, which is balancing this thing, balancing between water, which is the emotions, and earth, which is our health and our finances and our housing and our shelter, and it's everything that we need to be in this organic world. And it's our emotions, and in temperance, we're balancing those two things. So if in the sunlight, you can really see what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what makes you the best person that you are, and what also happens to be your faults. And we're all going to have faults, and we're going to have faults until we die. We don't become perfect as human beings. We're perfect souls, but we're not perfect animals. That's just not how this thing works. And so if we can balance that into temperance, we can, now this is coming out of my sacral, out of that solar plexus, there's this big relief. It comes into this wheel of fortune because when we do become released, not only from quarantine, but apparently, also from this pandemic, this may go on for a while. That's what the scientists are telling us, and that's what we're hearing, and that's okay. But we will be released from it, and our species is going to go on, and it's going to go on to have hopefully new and different times because we needed that to happen. One way or another, we need to have new and different times. Whatever created this situation, obviously, we created this situation from our own habits. I think maybe that's not obvious, but to me, I think we created this thing from our own habits. And with our destruction of various things, rainforests and things like this, well, we created this ability for this virus to do this to us. So hopefully, the wheel of fortune takes us into this new place. And the only way we're going to get there is if we let go of some of the things I think that we've held fast to and the fears that we've believed that we couldn't self-manage and that we need these demigods or whatever to take care of us in this way. So at any rate, however you want to tell the story in that way, whatever a person's personal beliefs are about what's happening here, it would appear from this reading that we're going to a new and better place that won't replay this. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Super helpful and optimistic also, right? Like the
Surprisingly
just,
optimistic.
yeah,
Yes.
of just the agency that we have right now in how we move. Yeah. I want to end with just talking a little bit about what you're working on. I know that you're doing tarot card readings and that you're doing remote courses and workshops. I'm just curious if you want to say anything about it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm always doing readings. You can always find me on my website, and I am currently also doing workshops, weekly workshops. I do workshops on and off. I work out of a shop in New Orleans called Rosalie Botanicals often when I'm able to. Right now, we're not able to do that, so I'm doing workshops remotely, which is really cool, and I will probably continue that beyond our quarantine because I like it quite a bit. I will also be doing some writing workshops coming up. You can always find out what I'm doing on my website and find me every month in Anti-Gravity magazine, which is just a really cool magazine out of New Orleans anyway, which is online also every month. I think that's also, and I'm working on a book. I plan on having a book done here pretty shortly. So hopefully I'd love to see it available late this year if possible. So it's a tarot book. So those are my big projects right now.
Awesome. You are busy and
Yes.
that's great. Thank you. I really want to just thank you for being on the show. And folks, your website again is michelleembree.com. It's MICHELLE, Michelle Embree, EMBREE.com. And so folks can find out more about you there, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, great. And any social media you want them to follow?
I also have a YouTube channel, Michelle Embree.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being on Bespoken Bones.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful interview. I really appreciate it.
If this has been helpful for you, listeners, I really want to invite your support on Patreon. And becoming a Patreon gives you access to our upcoming guests. It also gives you a chance to ask your dream questions, to recommend guests that you'd like to hear us invite on the show. We also have a new YouTube channel where we're putting up all the podcasts, so you can subscribe to that as well. So I am Pavini Moray. This is Bespoken Bones, and we'll be back every full and new moon with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.